Okay. Let's see how we're doing here. The computer's a little bit at a distance from me because if I don't plug it in, I'm afraid that it'll die for lack of battery. All right. So let's just review the last point that we made when we were learning the Tosfos, Dibar Maskil, Lo Yifchesu Lo Me'arba Kosos. And Tosfos was meticulous in his reading of the word lo in Lashon Yachid, implying that you only have to take money from the Tamchui to supply lo, meaning him, the Balabayas, the Oni, with Dalid Kosos. We're not interested and we're not obligated to shave off from the Tamchui enough money to supply every member of the household, his wife and his older sons and daughters, with Dalid Kosos. That we're not obligated to do. And Tosfos adds, it's not different than Kiddush. She'echad motzias kulam. Okay then. So that's what we know so far. So in the Amudei Hod, on the first page, he quotes the Chidushei HaGriz al Harambam, which is the Brisker Rav, Reb Chaim's younger son, Rabbi Yitzchak Zev Halevi Soloveitchik, who claims that according to the Rishonim, and he gives a list, the Rambam, and apparently the final conclusion of Tosfos, and the Rosh, Shebi Ikar Chiyuvam Leko Din Miyuchad Shel Shtias Kosos Yayin Ela Ikar Din Dalid Kosos Ulomar Es Seder Haggadah, meaning the four brachos, Al Dalid Kosos. Hainu Sheyomar Kiddush Al Hakos, Birchas Gol Yisrael Al Hakos, Birchas Habozin Al Hakos, Birchas Halal Al Hakos. Vochiach Shekeni Shitas HaTosfos VeHaRosh. It's not only the Shita of the Rambam, but also that of Tosfos Rosh, Tosfos and the Rosh, Vehevi Gimel Rayos. So again, all this is very new to us. We always understand that the mitzvah of Daled Kosos is to drink Daled Kosos derech cherus, to demonstrate cherus. But the Brisker Rav is claiming that there's a whole school of Rishonim who understood that there's no separate din in Daled Kosos of Shtiyas HaKos, but the mitzvah is Amiras HaGodah v'Abrachos Al HaKos. So what we want to do today, A and B, A is to check out his three proofs. The first one we can give on our own, the fact that according to Tosfos, we don't have to supply every member of the household with Daled Kosos because it's no different than Kiddush and Hu Motzias Kulam. But we're going to see two other rayos that the Rishonim hold that the mitzvah of Daled Kosos is not shtia, but rather it's koshel bracha. That's A. And B, we're going to revisit all three rayos of the Brisker Rav and try to disprove them. Okay? This is what I call postmodernism, if you've ever heard that phrase, because Brisker Torah is modernism. the next stage after Brisket Torah is to try to disagree and point out perhaps the holes in the logic. I'll just tell you one thing about the Brisket Rav. He was the epitome, the paradigm of logic. Everything had to be logically proven. So to contest the proofs of the Brisket Rav, that's like a big to-do. All right, I'm just going to get myself some water here. All right. Number one. First, he says, and again, I'm not going to read every word inside. He says that Tosfos and the Rosh say, "Eino tzarich sheyu daled kosos lefnei kol echad mibnei habayis." It's enough that the Baal Habayis has daled kosos to recite the Haggadah. Ubnei beiso yotzu yidei chovah, so they fulfill their obligation, each member of the household, by hearing the Baal Habayis when he recites the bracha al hakos. Says the Brisket Rav, if daled kosos is shtia, how could it be that the shtia of the Baal Habayis would be meaningful for the Bnei Habayis? Only if you assume that the definition of daled kosos is what? Amira, a bracha al hakos, then Shapir, I understand very well, Tosfos and the Rosh, that it's enough that there are daled kosos in front of the Baal Habayis. Again, this is what you call a starka raya. I mean, it's hard to believe that we can contest this proof. All right, let's go on to the second proof of the Brisket Rav. And this has to do with a sugya later on Daf Kuf Ches Amid Beis, which is called Chai. What does Chai mean? Chai means concentrated wine that's undiluted. So the wine has to be diluted with water. And you have undiluted wine, the original concentrated wine. And Tosfos says that lechatchila, we need mazug. That even though the Gemara says shasan chai yotza, if he drinks the undiluted concentrated wine, he has fulfilled this mitzvah of daled kosos, but yotza b'di'evid, it's not lechatchila. And then Tosfos asks, wait a minute, why are you telling me that lechatchila we need mazug when the Mishnah in Masechet Brachos Daf Nud Beis establishes Asar Dvarim Nemru b'Koshel Bracha? There are 10 requirements for a Koshel Bracha, and one of them is Chai, that you recite the bracha over undiluted wine. So the Brisket Rav says that if Tosfos held that daled kosos was a separate halach of shtia, then the kash of Tosfos makes no sense. Because although a regular koshel bracha, you're okay with chai, you don't add anything by diluting it because it's yayin. But in the case of daled kosos, where there's a mitzvah of shtia, you want to drink wine that's drinkable. You know, concentrated wine is going to kill you. You know what I mean? Shiny yayin shel arba kos shetiknu bo din shtias yayin v'tiknu sheyeh yayin arev. Right, that's an important word for us. Arev ayin reish beis. It's got to be pleasant. Achshar kos shel bracha. There's no din of shtia. It's only amiras habracha al kos. So you don't need even lechatchila mazug, because you don't even have to drink from the cause. So what was the underlying analogy or the premise of Tosfos, that there's a stira between the fact that we lechatchila require the daled kos to be mazug, as opposed to a koshel bracha where chai is fine? That's not a kash at all. You're comparing apples and oranges. I mean, in the case of daled kosos, the mitzvah is what? shtia, so we want it to be arev. Therefore, we want mazu. But in the case of koshel bracha, where there's no requirement of shtia, it's just amiras habracha lakos, then what's the difference between mazug and chai? So we see that Tosfos is operating with the premise that Dalid Kosos is a mitzvah of shtia. Otherwise, he would have no steer, no kasha from the Gemara about koshel bracha. Raya Shlishis. Now we get to a third proof for the Brisker Rav. Tosfos says, Ruba de Kasa, Hainu Kimole Lugma. What does that mean? That means, right, mole lugma means that if you would roll the liquid into one side of your cheek, it would fill up that cheek, that side of the cheek, one side of the cheek. That's not really shtiyas hakos. The Ramban points out that in Dalid Kosos, it's not enough to drink mole lugma. You need rov kos, because if the mitzvah is shtia, it's not just shtiyas yayin. You know, a person takes a straw and he drinks wine from a straw, he's got to drink wine from a kos, the dalid kosos. And if you have to drink the kos, then the Ramban argues it's got to be rov kos. And losagi b'mole lugma. So with regard to dalid kosos, where the mitzvah shtiyas hakos, you need rov kos. In Kiddush, for example, there's no din of shtiyas hakos. It's just the amiras hakiddush al hakos. But you need te'ima. You have to be toim from the kos, right? That's a kavod that you have to give to the koshel bracha. And for that, te'ima, moli lugmav is enough. You know, one side of his cheek, you know, is sufficient. But Tosfos equates dalid kosos with any koshel bracha, and he says it's enough to have moli lugmav. Against the Ramban, who says, yeah, go ahead.
Is Tosfos suggesting that Moli Lugmav is equivalent to Rov Kos?
Well, that depends on the size of your kos, Ruben. Like, for example, this kos,
okay, but the minimum
if you want to drink Rov kos, you would probably need a lot more than Moli Lugmav. And imagine if, let's say, which I wouldn't recommend, right? Let's say you use a kos, not this size, but this size. Can you see it? Rov kos of this size would be probably 5 times mole lugma. Again, I'm not measuring it. So how could Tosfos claim that mole lugma is enough if you need shtiyas hakos? And the Ramban is saying, no. Mole lugma is not enough. Mole lugma is enough for te'ima in a koshel bracha like Kiddush, but in Dalid Kosos, where there's a requirement of shtiyas hakos, you need rov kos. So the Brisker Rav says from the fact that Tosfos equated Dalid Kosos with Kiddush and all other koshel bracha, and all you need is sufficient to be moli lugma, which is te'ima, it must be that the mitzvah is amiras habracha lakos. The te'ima is only there because it's a koshel bracha, but it's not a din of shtiyas hakos. And the Ramban is very logical here, says the Brisker Rav. The Ramban is requiring rov kos. So if you have a kos this big, you're going to have to drink all of that. That's probably, I don't know how many times moli lugma. And again, we're not talking about Og Melech HaBashan over here. But obviously Tosfos that doesn't require rov kos says the Brisker Rav, all you need, like any koshel bracha, is te'ima, which is moli lugma. Now, from this point on, the Amudei Hod is going to contest against the Brisker Rav on all 3 counts, all 3 rights. Number 1. He says, the truth is that as far as the issue as to whether or not the Gabayit stock of the Tamchui, who are in charge of the Tamchui, have to give Dalid Kosos and supply only to the Balabayis or to everyone of the household, Tosfos vacillates about this. He doesn't come to any definite conclusion. Lemaisa, at the end of the day, Tosfos is going to conclude, and we'll take a look inside B'li Neder, that that if we do it in the right way, in the ideal way, every one of the Bnei Abayis should have his own kos. If somebody could just tell me that they see me, because all sorts of things are showing up on my screen here. Can you see me?
Yeah, we see you.
Oh, okay, good. No, I can't see you because I don't know, something called driver updates, I guess. This is a new laptop for me. Hopefully it'll go away so I can see your beautiful faces. Anyway, so the questionnaire is that Tosfos at the Maskana says Nachon lahachmir lahatzrich dalid kosos l'kol echad v'echad. The bottom line of Tosfos is that if you want to do it the right way, the ideal way, then you should guarantee that every one of the members of the household should be supplied with dalid kosos. So let's look inside and see if we could find that. The Nachon lahachmir, just 1 second, where is it? At the very end of Tosfos lo yivchasu lo mi arba kosos, ulahatzrich arba kosos lekol echad. Okay? So the bottom line of Tosfos, literally, is that we should be machmir and guarantee that every single person at the Seder table has his own dalid kosos to drink dalid kosos. The Rosh also writes, Nagu litain lifnei kol echad v'echad koso. The minig is to be machmir, so that every person has his own kos. Uledivrei agriz, the kol mashenoktu Tosfos v'arosh, the sagi b'dalid kosos, b'moli lugma, v'urak mishum desvirule, the lekadin shtia midalid kosos. Is tema da noktu l'chumra di'eshtin. According to the Brisker Rav, that Tosfos holds that moli lugma is all you have to drink from the kos, and that's because the mitzvah is the amiras habracha on the kos, and all you need is te'ima, but you don't need shtia. So why is Tosfos advocating and recommending that we should be machmir to make sure that everybody has his own kos? Next, Tosfos says that in dalid kosos l'chatchila you need meziga, and Tosfos asks the kasha, but in any bracha, any koshel bracha, chai is just as good as mazu. So so the Brisker Rav says, apparently, if Tosfos says all you need, I'm sorry, that l'chatchila you need mazu, then apparently, I'm sorry, if Tosfos questions why do you need mazu, after all, the Gemara Bracha says that chai is fine, Tosfos must be assuming that it's not a din of shtia, shtia reva, but rather it's only din of koshel bracha. So he says the following. He says, "Im havi svirule de dalid kosus yesh b'hem din shtia b'fnei atzvelo yamakom la'achshos miha de dalid de koshel bracha lo tzarech meziga dvarim tzarech iyun del dvar havile dos lefarish del l'mayden aktina l'mayse tzar kosel lechad v'echad is be'inan shtia b'fnei atzve dalid kosos." Now, since Tosfos L'Maskana says that we should be machmir and guarantee that everyone has his own kos, then that should explain why you need you need mazug, as opposed to another kosher bracha which doesn't need mazug, and chai is fine. So just to summarize, a lot of what the Amudei Hod is pointing out is based on the maskon of Tosfos, that roy lahachmir, to guarantee that every person has his own daled kosas, which seems to indicate that he's not comparing it to a kosher bracha, because if the Brisker Rav is right that Shitas HaTosas is just a kosher bracha, all daled kosher bracha, why does he machmir? And you begin to understand no, I'm saying if the reason that Tosfos equates kosher bracha and daled kosos, for example, requiring nothing more than moli lugmav, and even chai should be enough, so why does Tosfos say that every single person has to have his own kos? Od yesh l'tmoa. Okay, so this starts a whole new mara mokom for us, a whole new source, and that's the Rosh in Tshuva. The Rosh wrote Tshuvas HaRosh. And the Rosh writes, the Yesh Chiyuv b'fnei atzmo lishtos daled kosos milvad din shtia de koshel bracha. So the Rosh is telling us that there are two dimensions to daled kosos. In addition to the halach of koshel bracha, there's a chiyuv to drink the kosos. So again, koshel bracha is one thing, but the Rosh is saying in addition to koshel bracha, we need shtia, because of the special halach of daled kosos. Now it's strange. The very same tshuva, the Rosh, that requires shtias daled kosos, in addition to the koshel bracha halacha, he says that all you need is mali lugma. Maybe that's what Reuven was saying before. Now, according to the Brisker Rav, the entire din of mali lugma is a din, it's halacha in koshel bracha. It's not shtia, because shtia requires rov kos, whereas in koshel bracha, all you need is te'ima, which is moli lugma. So if there was halacha, says the Brisker Rav, of daled kosas b'shtia, then you have to drink rose kos. And the Rosh is saying, no, that in addition to the mitzvah of koshel bracha and daled kosas, we have a shtia, but yet the Rosh insists that moli lugmav is sufficient. So this is a tema. This is a question we're going to have on the Tshuvas HaRosh based on the premises of the Brisker Rav. Because on the one hand, the Rosh is advocating that we need shtia and daled kosos, not enough amira. And on the other hand, he says all you need is moli lugmav. So the bottom line is that according to Tshuvas HaRosh, there is a din of shtia in daled kosos, which makes it different than a regular classic koshel bracha. But on the other hand, the Rosh is saying you don't have to drink rov kos. All you have to drink is moli lugma. So shtia means moli lugma. So it's interesting. If I understand correctly, according to the Rosh, we said that everybody should have their own cups. And now the Tshuvas HaRosh says you drink moli lugmav. So on the one hand, everybody has to have his own kos, which is not true for Kiddush or any other kosher bracha. So you see that there's a mitzvah of shtiyas hakos, but yet the Rosh is insisting that no matter what size a cup is, right, you can have this gigantic kos. Nevertheless, shtia means moli lugma. Moli lugma constitutes a shtia. Like, let's say, for example, a nazir. Right, today's daf in the daf yomi is about a nazir. A nazir is not allowed to drink wine. If he drinks a moli lugmav, then that would be a violation of the iser shtiyas yayin, because shtia equals moli lugmav. So when you get to the flip side, in a mitzvah case, like Dalit Kosos, which requires shtia according to the Rosh, then moli lugmav is sufficient. That constitutes a shtia. So everybody has to have their own cost, so that everybody will implement a shtia, but it's sufficient that they have rov kos. I'm sorry, that they have moli lugmav. Now up to number ches, on the bottom of page 2. I'm just reading it over to myself. I don't understand what bothers him here. Oh, I see. He's saying that we really don't understand the logic of the Rosh, because the Rosh borrows the halacha of moli lugmav from a kosher bracha, and he clones it on to Dalit Kosos, even though he maintains that Dalit Kosos has a din of shtia, which doesn't apply to a classic kosher bracha. So how does he borrow the halacha? How does he deduce that moli lugmav is sufficient from the law of kosher bracha, where we have halacha of moli lugmav? On the contrary, once you admit, the Rosh is admitting that there's a separate takana and a mitzvah of shtiyas hakos with regard to Dalit Kosos, so what right does he have to borrow the halacha moli lugmav from a kosher bracha? He should be saying that you have to drink rov kos, because it's halacha and shtiyas hakos. And that's also a difficulty that we should raise according to the Brisker Rav, because according to Brisker Rav, there are two roads that never merge over here. There's kosher bracha, and that's moli lugmav, and then there's shtiyas Dalit Kosos, for those Rishonim who require it, and then you need rov kos. The Rosh here is sort of straddling both sides of both roads here. He's saying, on the one hand, yeah, there's a separate halacha in Dalit Kosos of shtia, and we have to guarantee that everybody has his own kos and drinks from the kos. But since in kosher bracha it's sufficient that you drink a moli lugmav, that's going to prove that even in Dalit Kosos, where there's a mitzvah of shtia, moli lugmav is enough. Name, what kind of business is that? Okay, and once you already established that in Dalit Kosos you need a separate takana and a separate chiyuv of shtia, then I should assume you need rov kos. Why do you have a right to equate it to a kosher bracha and borrow the halacha of moli lugmav? So according to Brisker Rav, we're really in a little bit of a confused state. So now the Amudei Hod on page 3 is going to present his own variant of the Brisker Rav. Venerally, bedas toso rosh esfilu the aflet sad shetzorch l'seis kos kol echad v'echad ena pirush devolel haseder yeshna mitzvah yuchedes shel shtiyas hayayin. Yes, we have to guarantee that every person has his own Dalit Kosos, but not because of a special mitzvah Dalit Kosos of Shtiyas HaYayin. El Adin Shel Yayin Shabo, the Yayin halacha here is Midin Amiras Bracha Al Kos, like Kiddush and like Sheva Brachas and Virkas Hamazon Avdol and so forth and so on. V'shara Dvar Maturim Kos. Ach, Mikom Kabalil Seidlo Sagi Sheyishta Mavarch Bi'atzmos HaKos El B'inin Shekol Echad V'echad Yishta Kos. All right, so I think truth is that he's already sort of led us. You know, how do you say you lead the horse to the water? He's already led us to this point. Basically, Daled Kosos is Koshel Bracha. What was the unique takana that was added and piggybacked onto Koshel Bracha with regard to Daled Kosos on Leil HaSeder? It's the following. We're going to borrow the shtia of Koshel Bracha and impose it upon every single individual. So whereas Koshel Bracha, only one person has to drink from the kos, in Daled Kosos, every single person, to fulfill his personal obligation of Daled Kosos, has to drink from the kos as if it were a Koshel Bracha, as if he was the only man in town, the only show in town. So in Koshel Bracha, one person can be shosa the kos on behalf of everyone else. That halacha doesn't apply to Daled Kosos Leil Pesach. Each person, as if he was the only man in town, will have to drink from the kos, but he'll drink from a Koshel Bracha. It's not a separate shtia of Daled Kosos. It's the shtia of a Daled of a Koshel Bracha. Why? If you're treating the Daled Kosos as Koshel Bracha, then one person should be sufficient, and I could plug in and be yotze with his shtia. I don't need to drink from the kos. No, in Daled Kosos, they were masakin shtia. No, if they were masakin shtia, then I should require rov kos. No. They're requiring a shtia of the Koshel Bracha. I mean, it's in Yiddish we say it's nishtay her and nishtay hin. So that's what he's going to try to attack and analyze in number Yud here, which on page given. We have a school here across the street. I don't know if you hear their announcements. He says the following. This is based on the Rav Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe of Chabad. And the halacha is with regard to a kos shel bracha, any one of the people around the table could drink from the kos. You don't require that the Makadosh himself will drink from the kos. Why? He says the following, even though we need a shtia, like we spoke about Moli Lugmov or Te'ima with regard to kos shel bracha, ein ma'akiv sheyishta mavarich atzmo, the mavarich himself doesn't have to be the one who drinks, eladai b'shtias acher, someone else could drink from it. Afilu mat'im mimenu l'tinok. He could even give some of the wine to a child to drink. Shelo chivo elo lomar shira al hayayin sheyishte mimenu eze adam Yisrael sheyashtia shehi chashuva hanoel lo. But let's see if we can digest the Rav Shulchan Aruch. He's saying here, if I understand correctly, that there are two halachas. One is really the essential halacha, fundamental, and the other is an add-on. One halacha is shira al hayayin, which means to recite the bracha over a cup of wine. There's another halacha of shtia. But that halacha of shtia is not part and parcel of the shir al hayayin. The drinking of the wine is not in any way an embellishment of shtia, of shira al hayayin. Shira al hayayin means recite whatever you have to recite, the song of praise to Hashem, the kiddush, over a cup of wine. Period. There's another halacha called shtia. But that's not part of the shir al hayayin. So it's not connected in a very particular way to the mavarech. The mavarech only has to do a recitation of shira al hayayin. That he did. Now there's another halacha of shtia. That's not in any way connected with the primary chiyuv of shira al hayayin. So it's not connected to that person. If there's a din of shtia, it can apply and be fulfilled by any member of the house, even a katan. Okay, now he quotes the Ritva. The Ritva wrote a work called Hilchas Brachos. Harei amarnu shayayin shaliachar hamazon o shalifnei hamazon kishiyesham kvius v'tziruf echad mevarch lekulam v'af al pi shezeh shoseh v'zeh ochel Chavero kos acher v'shoseh v'soch beintayim shekevan sha'asu tziruf ubirech zeh lahotziam v'tar min hakos hareu ke'ilu shasu kulam v'nifteru shekein bebirchas kiddush v'avdolim toim ech be'am yotzu kulam. So again, let's say, for example, when Birchas Hanenim, we're both going to drink. So I could be motzi you in a Birchas Hanenim. Then I taste from the drink. Now, if someone else drinks immediately, then that's fine. But what if he was mafsik? He starts a whole conversation. Says the Ritva, he was yotze yedei chovas habracha. He doesn't need a bracha. When you need a bracha, you have to drink immediately after the bracha. Otherwise, it's a hefsek. This guy didn't drink immediately after the bracha. It was only the mavarech who drank. And yet, even though he got involved in a discussion with someone, he can now continue. He can now drink. He doesn't have to repeat the bracha. Why not? Says the Ritva, because the drinking of the Mevarech is now chal, it's now related legally to the entire, whoever's there and wants to be yotzi with that bracha. So he says the following, Kasher, Echad motzi es chaveru bebirchas hanenim, ha-Mevarech ta'am, Afal pisha shomeh sach, right? He got distracted. Lifnei shetam biatzmo, he hasn't tasted it. Yotze yidei chovas habracha, and why? Sheteimas hamavarech nechsheves l'teimas kulam. Very strange halacha. It's pretty revolutionary that one person drank, and it's as if everybody else drank. So to explain this Ritva, he quotes the Chazon Ish. The Hadash Homei Yotzi Dechovas Birchas Hamavarech, who mishum shenasu kechad gufa le'inyan habracha. So he adds another phrase to the Ritva. Why is it considered that they all drank? Because as far as the bracha is concerned, they're like one guf. Kulo nasu kechad gufa. Correct? Very strange. Kulam nasu kechad gufa. It's like you have halacha called ishto kegufa. So we have halacha that all the people who are participating in this meal and are listening to the Mavarech make his bracha, it's as if they're all one guf. And therefore, with his shtia, whoever it was, the Mavarech, it's as if they all drank, because they're all one guf. So again, if you're telling me it's kechat gufa, it's as if each one made the bracha, that's one thing. But we're going a major step, beyond that in the Ritva. Not only is it as if I made the bracha, if I'm listening to your bracha, but it's as if I drank from the kos, just like you drank from the kos. V'havikilu birech bi'atzmo. It's not only limited linyan bracha legabe shtir. Dvarim anilvim v'nitzrachim labracha. You hear this? The bracha schleps along the shtir to make it into one entity because there's no bracha without shtir. Just like there's no shtir without bracha, there's no bracha without shtir. So the Bilvim, those who are listening to his bracha, are considered together with him as chad gufa, not only the bracha, but even with regard to the shtia, because the bracha needs the shtia. So it means that the linkage between the people who are listening and the Mavarech is not just limited to the bracha, but to anything that's part of the bracha, that's necessitated by the bracha. And what does the bracha necessitate? Shtia, because there's no bracha without shtia. So the shtia is schlepped along, it's dragged by the bracha for this halacha that we're all one guf. And anyone who hears his bracha, it's as if he made the bracha, and if he drank, it's as if you drank. Because the drinking is nitzrach, it's required for the bracha. Kedei, kevan shekedei shetachal habracha be'inan, we need te'ima below hefsei. Is te'ima samavarech chashiv hashomea ki guf kechad guf imo ki ilu tam hu atzmo. So once it's kilu tam hu atzmo, there's no hefsek, there's no sicha because he already drank. You're allowed to speak out between the first shti and the second shti. And the Ritva proves this from Kiddush and Avdollah. The halach is ta'am echad yatzu kulam. Right, in the case of Kiddush and Avdollah, no one else is drinking. So you see that there's halach of kechad gufa legabe the shtia, not just legabe the bracha, because kosher bracha requires shtia. So for a moment, I'm going to fast forward to the paragraph on Daf Dalid that starts with Al Kain. Tzarech Al Karcha, Tzarech Lomar Desfile La Rit for the Chol Misha Makadesh O Mavdil, Tzarech Sheyitom, Hu Atzmo Min Akos, V'Had Mahani Te'imas Acherim Hu Rak Mishum Shemidin Shomer Ka'ona Nasu Kechad Gufa LeInyan HaTe'ima V'Harei Tamu Kulam Im Kain Shaper Al Chiach HaRitva V'Had Mahani Te'imas HaAcher V'Kiddush V'Avdollah L'Chol HaShomim Te'imas Echad V'Kiddush Avdollah L'Chol HaShomim Degam Kasher Sach HaShomea Ben Shmiyaso L'Te'imaso Yotza Yidei Chovas Bracha Im Kadam HaMavorech V'To'am. So that's again this halacha of Nasu Kechad Gufa and Mahani Te'imas HaEchad L'chol HaShomer. Even if they would speak out before they drank, they all fulfilled their chiyuv of bracha with the te'ima of the mavarech or whoever drank from. So now we're up to Yud Aleph. This is where we're going to wrap it up for today. Ulefi zeh yesh lomar dahad be'inin b'leil aseder sheyishte kol echad mikos b'fnei atzmo. Everybody has to be guaranteed and supplied with a kos. Eino mishum shetiknu b'mitzvos daled kosos milvad din amir ala kos gam din shtia b'fnei atzmo. El din hashtia hu adin harogil shekol amir ala kos tzricha shtia shel zeh sheyotzi yidei chovas hamira. El Tibi alma sagi v'shtias hamavarech o echad ben hashomer mishum dechashivi kechad gufa le'inyan shtia af le'inyan shtia ach belel aseder shemilvad zeh shemekayim din kiddush begal Yisrael le'berkas hamos v'halal alakos tiknu gam sheba osam amiros tiskayim gam mitzvah nosefes v'hu mitzvahs daled kosos legabi hach mitzvah daled kosos amru V'lo yichashev hashomea im hamavar kechad gufa le'inyan shtir. See, since the following, when we're all involved in that mitzvah on which we make a bracha, like for example, Kiddush, so we're all having Kiddush and we make a bracha on the Kiddush. So we become Chad Gufa. But if we introduce another mitzvah, like for example, Daled Kosos, then in addition to Kiddush and all the other brachos on which we recite and drink Daled Kosos, we have a mitzvah Daled Kosos. So with regard to the mitzvah Daled Kosos, we don't apply the principle of Chad Gufa. Umemela chayiv kol echad lishtos b'fnei atzmo kimo hamavarech atzmo. So in other words, your shtia is not going to relate to me. We're not Chad Gufa. So that halach of Chad Gufa was suspended with regard to Daled Kosos, so each one has to drink. But what's he drinking? He's drinking from a kosher bracha. Just in a normal kosher bracha, when you have a mitzvah of Kiddush, they establish that one shtia is enough for everybody because we're all Chad Gufa and we participate in that chova of bracha. But in the case of Daled Kosos, there's a new takana and a new obligation of Daled Kosos. For that mitzvah Daled Kosos, you can't say that we're Chad Gufa. Each person has his own individual chiyuv and therefore requires his own shtia. But again, it's a shtia from a kosher bracha. It's not the halacha of, let's say, the Ramban or others that you need rov kos and it's a mitzvah shtia and it's their cherus. It's just a halacha of kosher bracha. In Cain, Asi Shapir, now we have an answer to our original question. Divrei Tosos or Rasha Hishru Lagamri is din shtias yayin. Shel Daled Kosos Ledin Shtias Yayin the Kiddush V'Shad Dvarim, asking the question, why do we require mazug? Why not just get away with chai? Based on the equation between Daled Kosos and a kosher bracha like Kiddush, and the answer is because that's exactly what happens in Daled Kosos. What happens is exactly what happens in Kiddush, and that requirement of shtia is identical to the shtia of Kiddush. And if in the shti of Kiddush you don't require mazug, then in Daled Kosos you should not require mazug. V'chein amru, and also Tosfos concludes, shekmoshe b'kiddush sagi b'malei lugma, v'hu adin v'dalet kosa sagi b'malei. Why? Because again, it's halacha of cedar brach ala kos. With a shtia, it's just that here we require, because of the additional mitzvah of dalet kosos, a shtia of each person, and we break the halacha of chad gufa, and we remove it. Ukmoshe birchas hamazon be'inan yain chai, who adin dalet kosos niboy yain chai. V'im dalet kosos be'inan yain mazug, as who adin birchas hamazon v'shar kosos bracha be'inan yain mazug. And we have no way of justifying the distinction. Okay, then, so this is where we'll stop for today. And basically, we're up to page Hey, but we still have to do the Otzer Ayunim. So at some point, maybe tomorrow, what's tomorrow? Tomorrow is Yom Chamishi. No, tomorrow's Yom Shishi. So I guess we'll have to wait till Sunday after Shabbos, and then we'll try to pick it up in the Otzer Ayunim and the Amudei Ho. So we're beginning to piece the puzzle, get the piece of the puzzle together. Okay, then? So let me take this opportunity to wish you a great Shabbos. Thank you so much.